Welcome into another episode of 5 Rounds here on the 5 Reasons Sports Network. Alex Donno alongside Frank Zaffere and James Walker, and we are served proudly by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. I'm less than 48 hours away from heading up to the Quarterdeck Davie location. I hope we see you guys out there. We are having a little old 5 Reasons Sports watch party. It's going to be Heat Hawks Game 4. Now, Game 3 is tonight. If they take that 3-0 series lead tonight, I want everybody who comes out and sees us on Sunday at the Quarterdeck Davie. That's going to be a 7 p.m. start time for the Heat game. Get out there a little bit early if you want to. Bring your brooms. If the Heat get that win tonight, I hope that the staff at the Quarterdeck doesn't mind if everybody who shows up to watch the game with us, you've raided your broom closet and you bring a broom to celebrate the impending sweep at the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. We're going to love to see you guys out there. You're going to love that food, man. The seafood is so fresh. I love the burgers and sandwiches. The baby back ribs are on point. They got TVs covering every wall. I'm going to be outside. Ethan Skolnick and I, the rest of the 5 Reasons crew, we're going to be outside in the patio area where they got the super big screen. Oh, that's a good time. It's a great place to wet your whistle. 2-for-1 happy hour all day, every day at the Quarterdeck. So come out and see us on Sunday at the Davie location. If you want to find that location or all the locations that might be nearest to you, check out their website. You can check out their full menu at the website as well, quarterdeckrestaurants.com. And oh, by the way, every UFC pay-per-view fight at the Quarterdeck for zero cover charge. quarterdeckrestaurants.com. Come for the food, stay for the fun. Alex Donno, let me go down below first. James Walker, hope you had a good week, man. How are you?
Yeah, doing good. Doing well. Made it through tax season, so we're plugging along now. Everything is a little more relaxed for the next couple of months, so good to go.
That's good, man. What about Frank Zaffere? How you been, sir?
Beautiful. I'm sorry I had to delay the show a day. I appreciate you.
Oh, this was your fault. I totally forgot. I just knew we're doing the show on Friday. I couldn't remember if it was Jay. I couldn't even remember if it might have been me who requested a one-day delayed show. But man, it's all gravy going into a big fight weekend. We do, and you know, we got boxing this weekend. Tyson Fury at Wembley, 94,000 people expected. We got girl power in MMA. We've got Cris Cyborg, Jessica Andrade, Amanda Lemos headlining Bellator and UFC cards respectively. So this is going to be a very interesting weekend. But guys, let's start with some of the quotes that lead us into the week, and we put this in the headliner for the episode. Jorge Masvidal, who's got his arraignment coming up later this month for his altercation with Colby Covington, but he talked about everything in life and fighting for over an hour with, God, one of the Paul brothers. I can't remember which one it was. Logan Paul, Jake Paul, they sound the same to me, but he was on a Paul brother podcast. And among other things, I found it very interesting, guys, when Masvidal, the BMF champion, started to talk about the guy who's really been the flavor of the month in the welterweight division, and that's Khamzat Chimaev. And it was Logan Paul he was speaking to, by the way, on the Impulsive podcast. He was asked about Khamzat Chimaev and if he's beatable. And here are some of the things Jorge had to say about it. I don't think shit of him, he said about Chimaev. He hasn't fought anybody, you know. He's got to go fight some guys first. He says they talk big about everybody they think they can get money from, talking about the UFC. He can bring in those Arabic countries that got a lot of money. I haven't seen one guy yet that he's beaten, and I'm like, okay, he beat up somebody good. So one of my first takeaways from this, Frank, is when Jorge Masvidal described the UFC talking big about anybody they think they can make money from, doesn't that remind you a bit of Masvidal's own rise, right? Like, is he looking in a mirror? Because listen, Jorge Masvidal, incredibly fun fighter to watch, but you know, the way that he's promoted, they promote him as if he's like a top 3 or 4 guy when he's really not, because he's got personality. He's got a crowd pleasing style. They can make money off of him. And then the other part with like him saying, you know, he hasn't fought anybody. Are we just going to start acting like Gilbert Burns is not anybody? Like, okay, for the most part. So Khamzat, what is he now? 11-0, I think. Like he's fought 10 nobodies, but the guy he just beat is somebody. Like Gilbert Burns is not chopped liver, Frank.
No, is George on a 3-fight slide? I think he is.
I believe so.
Yeah. Kamaru Usman twice, Colby.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all I can think about is like he is just doing his best to talk himself into another big fight. But I don't think anyone's interested in seeing that. I think particularly with Chimaev's ground game, we know how that fight's going to play out. I mean, George always has a puncher's chance, but it just sounds like he's trying to beat Colby to this opportunity. I think Colby's going to want this fight. I think Dana White must know that to already be talking about it. It feels like he's already selling the pay-per-view to me. Or no, it's not a pay-per-view, right? It's going to be free on ABC. Yeah. So I feel like they already know that fight's going to happen. And I think what you're seeing is a guy who has recently made all his money on, as Alex pointed out, the guy who people just like to see fight and isn't necessarily a contender. You're seeing this. You're starting to see him thrash around and try to remind everybody that he's still fun to watch and maybe he should fight somebody interesting. Kind of the way you see Conor McGregor doing it. There's a lot of similarities between those two at this point.
Yeah, the thing I liked about Masvidal the most was because he was honest and he kept it real. And lately, I feel like he's not sticking to his mantra. How can he not be at least a little bit impressed with Chimaev? How can he disrespect Gilbert Burns in the way that he did? I had to double check and make sure that the interview was after the Gilbert Burns fight. I thought maybe it was before the Gilbert Burns fight.
That's a good call.
They had recorded it a month ago or 2 weeks ago or something. Before the actual fight. I mean, so for him to say that, I just think he's being disingenuous. Either he's being disingenuous to himself or he's just being disingenuous to the public, which is kind of anti-Masvidal. Like, he was always the guy that was honest, kept it real. And so, you kind of wonder what's going on in his head these days because he hasn't really made a lot of good decisions in recent months.
One thing, like, he's, at least in terms of his fighting style, I don't think he's lacking self-awareness right now because Masvidal also talked about the steps that he's going to take to really try to improve his wrestling. Because listen, like, for the most part, he carries himself with his wrestling reasonably well. But then, yeah, when you go up against a guy like Colby Covington, you can see the clear difference. Okay. But he's talked about, what's that?
Or Kamaru Usman.
Or Kamaru. Yeah, as well. But so Masvidal, he's got intentions to spend a lot of time at a wrestling clinic at State College, PA, and he wants to try and, turn his weaknesses in wrestling into a strength, which I can respect it. But the wrestling would tie in. So, guys, if we do see at any point a matchup in the octagon between Jorge Masvidal and Khamzat Chimaev, like, James, how do you think that they would match up? Because to me, if Chimaev, and I think he showed you in the Gilbert Burns fight, he may not be the best game planner in the world because I thought that he could have committed a little bit more to his wrestling. He'd rather test out his hands. But if he would actually commit to a game plan against Jorge Masvidal, I think with his wrestling, Chimaev would probably have a relatively easy time beating Jorge Masvidal. So I don't think that matches up very well on paper. How do you think a matchup between Masvidal and Chimaev would go?
I think it's very one-sided. And the difference between Gilbert Burns and Jorge Masvidal is Chimaev would not be afraid to stay on the ground with him. Chimaev was a little bit hesitant to get Gilbert Burns. Once he was down, he didn't really like how it felt jiu-jitsu-wise. I don't think there's that same level of threat with Jorge Masvidal to where once he takes him down, I think you see a lot of wrestling, a lot of ground and pound. I think it'd be pretty one-sided in that respect. So credit to Masvidal for wanting to improve his weaknesses. But at this point in his career where he's 36, 37, getting around that age, I don't know how much improvement physically that he can really make, in that department to really compete with the elite wrestlers in his division. I think it's just one of those things where he's going to have to fight and stick to his game plan and stick to his strengths.
That's all great points. And I would also remind you of my words of wisdom last week. They kind of mishandled Chimaev. He can't fight Masvidal now. You don't fight Gilbert Burns and then go back and fight a guy on a 3-fight losing streak. He's got to fight Colby. They put him up at the top of the line. The next guy's Colby, and after that, it's the title. That's where he's in now. He's in the deep end of the pool. George is not in the deep end of the pool. I hate to break it to him. He's a great fighter, and I have a tremendous amount of respect for him. He is not in the deep end of the pool in that division.
He's in Conor McGregor territory. Like, and listen, there's nothing wrong with it because he can still make a lot of money. Like, there's nothing wrong with being essentially now the Cuban Conor McGregor, right? Where he can fight. They can match him up with anybody, even if it's a has-been. Like, they can match him up with one of my boys, the Diaz brothers. Not saying they're has-beens, but I'm just saying they could match him up with any Diaz brother. He already fought Nate once for the BMF title, and he's going to make a ton of money, but he's not a title contender anymore. Like, that ship has sailed. He's just not. It's the same thing with McGregor. He's not a legit title contender anymore. They might give McGregor more title shots, but they shouldn't. That's the same territory that Masvidal's in.
Didn't George get there because he filled in against Usman, right?
Yeah.
He had like no time to prepare. So then they said, well, let's give him another chance. So then there's 2 cracks at the title. And then it was like, okay, he's got beef with Colby, so he can fight the very next best guy in the division. He's worn it out now, right? I mean, it's clear now. Fight Conor McGregor, George. Fight Conor or fight Nate Diaz again. Or fight Nick. There's your options. And you'll make a lot of money doing it. Have a much better possibility of winning as well. It'd be nice to get a W and get paid.
Hey, Frank, when I remember you said this last week that the UFC mishandled Chimaev. When you say that, are you saying that from the UFC's perspective, or are you saying that from Chimaev's perspective?
I was saying it from Chimaev's perspective. Thanks for asking me to clarify that. I just don't think Chimaev is as obviously uber talented as that young man is. I think having him fight he damn near lost to Gilbert Burns. I mean, that could have gone the other way. And I think he will lose to Colby, and he shouldn't, right? Because he just needs a little more development. But they're putting him in the deep end of the pool, I think, a little too quickly. It doesn't mean he can't come back, but not everybody does. Ask Ronda Rousey about that. Yeah. Setback, and all of a sudden, you short circuit. And now all of a sudden it's wrestling. So, I don't know. But, I mean, I hope he's more resilient than that. But I just think it's a little too fast for him. I think it was evidenced by what Gilbert Burns did that he's not ready for Usman, certainly. And I don't think he's ready for Covington.
Yeah, no, great clarification with that. And it makes me think of his training partner, Darren Till. Wasn't he kind of fast-tracked pretty fast and fought Tyron Woodley, got knocked out, and was never really the same, right. Being one of the top prospects in the company at the time a few years back.
Well, we're going to get back into some Chimaev stuff, and also I found a way to work Nick Diaz into it as well. But we'll start with something completely off the beaten path in a new edition of The Toss-Up.
Okay, I'm just opening it right now. Here I go. Mike Tyson went viral this week when videos surfaced of him punching a man on a plane. What stands out to you the most about this story?
Well, listen, that was a cool video. Everybody's talking about it. That's like this week's version of the Will Smith slap from a few weeks ago, except like I didn't take Will Smith's side of it at the Oscars, but I can understand why people are taking Mike Tyson's side this time around. So this dude, clearly drunk, and we've come to learn a lot more about this guy who was antagonizing Tyson, and it's not such a good dude. But he was harassing Mike Tyson, sitting behind him on this plane. And then eventually Mike just had enough and he starts punching this guy, roughed him up a little bit. And yeah, most people are taking Tyson's side. But guys, my biggest takeaway from this, James, is that 20 years ago, I don't think anyone would do this, because I think people just forget Mike Tyson. I know he's reinvented his image with all the movie cameos he's done, The Hangover. He does the tours with the one-man show. Like, he has rebranded himself into America's sweetheart. A couple decades ago, everyone was scared to death of Mike Tyson. Like, this was the ear-biting, one-punch knockout heavy. Nobody would have harassed Mike Tyson like that 20 years ago. Like, people forget this guy used to be the baddest mother bleeper on the planet not too long ago. And I think it's easy to forget that because of the way he's rebranded himself. And the other thing is, this day and age, I think the guy and his friend was like filming it, and I think that they were doing this on purpose. I think they were doing this for clout. Like, they were trying to make a badass TikTok video. Obviously, 20 years ago, that could not have happened. And yet, 20 years ago, you're not trying to provoke Mike Tyson into punching you in the face. So things have changed so much, man. 2022, this is a crazy time to be alive, James.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head with that last point. I was going to say that, and that it's a generational faux pas, to where it just seems like it's so important for the 20 and under, the 30 and under crowd to make social media videos. They go to this extent to really risk their health and safety just to make videos. I just don't really see the point of it. I thought Mike Tyson was actually incredibly patient for who he is. Like, it would be expected for you and I and us on the show to be that patient, but knowing who Mike Tyson was and is, for him to wait as long as he did on the Mike Tyson curve, I thought that was pretty patient. And my last thought on that is where was the flight attendant? Where was the staff? I mean, that badgering went on for a while, to where, and it looked like it was in first class, right? It wasn't.
It was.
Aren't flight attendants right in front of the plane most of the time? Like where was the staff of JetBlue? I think it was JetBlue, right?
It was JetBlue, yeah.
Yeah. So where was the staff of that plane? But those are my thoughts on it.
Yeah, my thought, just to sum it up, I agree with you, James. My thought also is just that I feel like when people become caricatures of themselves, Mike Tyson doing the Hangover movies and all that stuff he's doing, I think you start to forget where he's from and what he's capable of. And he becomes this, this kind of cartoon character that you can mess with. And, they found out real quick where he's from and what he'll do to you when pressed. So that's just a lesson learned. I love it. I love that Mike cracked him. I saw Mike Tyson in the airport once in Vegas. He looked strung out on something. He was laying across 4 or 5 chairs in the airport. And I walked over because you see Mike Tyson, you got to say hello, right? And when I walked over to him, the first thing is that his stature is not impressive. Height-wise, shoulder width. It's, as the baddest man on the planet and watching him as a boxer, I expected a hulking Lennox Lewis type figure. And, he's not that. But there's this weird aura about him. And when he finally fixed his eyes on me and started talking, I thought, this is a real guy. And if I say the wrong thing, he's going to swing at me. So it made me super nervous, But I feel like I'm more enlightened that way. These people were clearly drunk and unenlightened. So
I had the same thing. I had the privilege of meeting Mike 7 or 8 years ago. Like he visited the radio station I was working at, and he was doing an interview. It was actually with the Hawk and Crowder show, and I was there. I got a chance to meet Mike, and I had the same impression, Frank. There's just an aura about the guy. I don't know if it's because like he's already famous and I followed his career. Like, I don't know. Maybe if I just ran into this guy on the street and I didn't know who he was, I may not feel that same aura. But there was just something about him. Like, you were 100%. And he was a sweetheart. Like, he was a super nice guy, but I wasn't trying to get him to punch me either.
Yeah, and Alex, you know what it was too? When he locks eyes on you, you can see a little bit crazy. I think that's what I was reading, Yeah. But I mean, also, like, I know what he's capable of. Like, I'm not going to fool with a guy like that. I mean,
No, and before we get to the next toss-up,
let me airplane where I can't get away.
Yeah, it's another, and they hadn't taken off yet, at least, but still, like you're still in a metal tube, and but they had not taken off yet at that point. Mid-flight, that would have been incredibly stupid. So here are the details per TMZ on the guy that Tyson actually punched. Before we get to the next toss-up, so the man who got punched by Mike Tyson has a long criminal record. His name is Melvin Townsend III. Sounds like his parents own a yacht club or something with a name like that. Melvin Townsend III. And this isn't his first encounter with the cops. He's been convicted of fraud, grand theft, burglary, possession of controlled substances, and trafficking in stolen property. As for specifics, they say the 36-year-old, which already tells me this guy should be old enough to know Mike, a little bit about Mike. Like if he's like 22, maybe you only know that's the guy from The Hangover, but he should know a little bit about Mike Tyson. But he broke into a property in 2018 and stole a trailer that he hitched to his pickup. The drug possession offense was for oxycodone. Official docs don't mention other specifics, but he served time twice, once for 20 months and another time for 15 months. So yeah, and it looked to me like he and his buddy who were filming were like, they were trying to make a sweet TikTok video. That's what. So honestly, you get what you deserve, right? Like, listen, I'm not saying like settling problems with violence is the right way to handle every situation. I'm not saying that, but if you treat Mike Tyson like that, what are you expecting to happen? Like,
guys, I could talk about this the rest of the show. Can you imagine being in that little airplane seat? Mike turns around.
Oh my God.
He's swinging. Where are you going? I mean, how do you cover up? I mean,
I'd be pissing my pants if that happened. Like,
should I go to the next one? Because I'll talk about Mike the rest of the show.
Yeah, let's go to the next one.
2 weeks ago, Khamzat Chimaev beat Gilbert Burns, but does it feel like Burns' stock actually went higher after the fight?
Yeah, and it kind of goes to, we talked a lot about last week about that fight. And I know that was kind of Frank's takeaway was like, you weren't super impressed with Chimaev that maybe you saw a couple of holes in his game. Like I still I got what I wanted, right? I'm a big Khamzat Chimaev fan. I wanted him to have a much tougher fight. He did. He fought, number 2 ranked guy in the division, got pushed through some adversity, got hit really hard, 3 full rounds in a decision. Chimaev won. Like, I got what I wanted, but I have noticed, Frank, that the way a lot of people are breaking down that fight was they were super impressed with Gilbert Burns for not getting smashed, right? So it's like, I almost feel like in a way, maybe Frank hit the nail on the head, at least in terms of the narrative. Maybe hit the nail on the head, because I find most people have only good things to say about Gilbert Burns coming out of that fight, even though he lost. But most people are looking at Chimaev like, okay, this guy's human. Like, it's like Ivan Drago. It's like, he's human. Like, who was it? Was it cousin Paulie who was like, he bleeds, Rock, he bleeds? It was something like that. Like, I feel like some of Chimaev's mystique, at least perception-wise, was lost.
Yeah, Burns has a lot of newfound respect, and his stock is up. And here's the best thing that could happen to Gilbert Burns. If Chimaev is wearing the belt in 2023, I think that easily sets up a rematch to where a lot of people will want to see this fight. Let's say Gilbert Burns beats a Belal Muhammad and another top contender in the next 12 months. I can see him getting a title shot if Chimaev is the champ. Where if Kamaru Usman is the champ, he got finished by Usman in the second round. There's not as strong of a case. But if Chimaev goes on to beat Colby Covington and beat Usman, I could see Gilbert Burns easily being his first title defense, and an easy storyline to saying, look, this was a fight of the year candidate from 2022. And a lot of people want to see this rematch. A lot of people think he even beat Chimaev. So why not line that up as the first title shot?
I could not agree more. I love what's happening for Gilbert because, look, in my opinion, Chimaev's going to lose to Colby Covington. And then where does he go? And a fun fight would be to see that one played back. And then, man, there's a lot of juice on the line. Because if Chimaev loses to him, it's like a tremendous – now you're on a 2-fight skid, as you descend from the upper levels of the division. Or, you beat him a second time and you leave no doubt. So I think Gilbert Burns is going to get his hand on him again. He'll probably have to fight, as you pointed out, he'll probably have to fight somebody in between. But I think he's going to get another crack just because I don't think Chimaev's ready for Usman or Covington. Number 3. Oh, can I comment on what Cliff wrote just quickly?
Sure. Let me pull that up.
Tyson has an arrest record also. It's so true, and I was negligent in not mentioning that Tyson actually had an assault. I think it was in like 98. He got in a car accident in Maryland and then smacked the guy who hit his car. And that always gave me terrors when I thought about it. You're driving along. Yeah, you forget to put on your turn signal. It's bad enough to deal with an accident, but you're dealing with Mike Tyson. And back then,
oh my God,
he was still the baddest man on the planet.
Yeah. Well, and back then, everybody was still scared to death of him, right? He's not the dude from The Hangover back then. Like, back then, it was like, oh my, this guy's going to kill me.
Right. But that should have, stories like that should have given those idiots in the airplane pause. The last toss-up I got is Daniel Cormier and his always words of wisdom. He says Nick Diaz will never fight again. Do you agree? And I know how Alex feels about it.
Of course I don't agree. I mean, first of all, Diaz can still make money fighting. He's still going to put asses in the seats. He still equals ratings. And he probably needs the money, right? I mean, Frank, you, James, and I, we talked about this when he fought Robbie Lawler. That seemed like a financially motivated decision. I don't know if that one fight, cleared up all of his whatever debts he may have had and put him in a great financial situation at this point. I think that was financially motivated. I would, though, for the record, I would actually prefer to see Nick Diaz graduate into more of a Legends circuit. Like, if I never see him in the UFC again, I'd be okay with that. Exactly. No, Bellator, they could find fights for him, ONE FC in Asia. Like, there would be options, because like there's just and the Robbie Lawler fight made sense because they're both kind of at similar points in their career, but there's not too many of those that the UFC can make. Like, they don't have a whole lot of Robbie Lawlers on the roster at this point, and Diaz didn't even beat Robbie Lawler. Although if he hadn't been knocked out, he would have won the fight. Don't even try to understand the logic behind that. Just bear with me here. But no, I think Diaz is gonna, like, he's not done fighting. I think he's gonna fight again somewhere. But then you could get into this awkward situation where, because he's under contract still with the UFC, and his brother's going through something like this right now. Like, the UFC might say, well, we don't want to release him because then he'll go over to Bellator and potentially a competitor of ours. But we also don't really want him to fight, so we're just going to kind of keep him under contract hostage and, like, offer him a fight he's not going to accept every 6 months to keep the clock moving. So it's going to be tough, man. Like, I would love the UFC just to say, you know what, we're going to release you. Best of luck with the rest of your career, however long that is. But they're probably going to play some games with him.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that you don't want him to fight in the UFC, because I'm surprised that you would say that, but I 100% agree that there's just not many fights for him there with the level of fighter that he is today. And for the UFC, I don't think he's worth that kind of headache anymore. Remember when he fought? A lot of people forget now, but he switched the weight conditions. You know, he threatened not to fight. You know, he would have missed weight. It was a big to do for a comeback fight. You would think that he would have had his, his T's crossed and his I's dotted and would have came in on weight and been ready to fight. But there was so much going on that it became like this big shindig to where I don't even know if it's worth it anymore for the UFC to deal with that kind of circus, considering the quality of fighter that he is now. But I could see him fighting in a smaller promotion and being a big name, maybe even like a main event. But he has to get himself in much better shape next time.
Well, what he should do, honestly, he should be boxing a Paul brother, right? Like I said this a few weeks ago. If we can get Nick and Nate Diaz liberated from their UFC contracts, I want to see a pay-per-view where you have Nick Diaz versus Logan Paul co-main event, Nate Diaz versus Jake Paul main event. You're going to set every record, guys. 10, 11, 12 million pay-per-views sold. And I will be buying half of those myself. Oh, it's going to be fantastic.
I got two thoughts on old Nick. I mean, I first of all, I don't think he came back just for money. I think there's a little ego there. There was a time when Nick was the man and Nate was only interesting because of Nick. And now Nate is the man. And especially the new generation has forgotten all about Nick. And I think he'd very much like to remind everybody who he is. My second thought, though, from that point, he came back, and I still believe, although he's too tough to admit it, I think he had a back injury in camp. You can say anything you want to say about either Diaz, but they're never not in shape. He looked slow, and he looked out of shape, as James pointed out, and I really believe that was due to injury. And back injuries are tough to get over. I can attest to that. So, I don't know what the future holds for him, but I prefer not to see him fight anymore, because I'd like to remember Nick as Nick and not Nick as this slow motion plotting version of himself that looked terrible. I mean, he really did. He did not look UFC worthy. And quite frankly, depending on who he's fighting in Bellator, he didn't look Bellator worthy. So, he still got the mystique. He still got the aura. And let's just keep it like that. Right out in the sunset.
Fair enough. So, and by the way, guys, we've got a Saturday where we're going to have the UFC and Bellator essentially going head to head with female main events, which is pretty cool. And got to tell you, man, I got to give the edge to Bellator here. So we got Cris Cyborg against Arlene Blencowe in Bellator, Amanda Lemos against Jessica Andrade, but Cris Cyborg, she still has the star power for me, guys. Like, honestly, I'm going to end up watching both fights. I don't know if they're going to be on at exactly the same time. Like the Bellator event's in Hawaii, so it might be on a little bit later. I'm not sure, but I'm more eager to watch Cris Cyborg than I am watching Amanda Lemos and Jessica Andrade. I'm sorry.
I agree. And is this 2 weeks in a row for Bellator? Because they had the McKee and Pitbull fight.
Yeah, it was last week. And I was more eager to watch that than the UFC event. Bellator's 2-0 this month.
Yeah, I think it's 2 weeks in a row.
Yeah, you're right.
Has put together a deeper card, or at least a better main event. But yeah, I mean, there's still an aura around Cyborg, even though Amanda Nunes kind of, took the sunshine off of her. But her fights are still fun. She's still dominant. She's still one of the top, maybe the top now that Amanda Nunes lost. Maybe the top female fighter out there. And there's a little talk now of Kayla Harrison at the PFL doing some cross promotion and trying to get that fight. So, so it'll be interesting to see if she can keep her winning streak going to at least keep that dream fight alive. So I'd be curious to hear what you all think about that possibility.
Guys, I'm glad you brought that up because I feel like when you have the invincible seeming fighter and they lose, they don't always lose at all in that one loss. Usually, sometimes they can recover a bit. Tyson certainly recovered after Buster Douglas. There's plenty of examples, but I feel like with Cyborg, that Amanda Nunes beatdown, it's over. Like really? I feel like, yeah, for me anyway, and maybe I'm just projecting, but it's like, she looked terrible, and she looked, she just looked out of her depth in almost every way. So like now what? I'm going to watch her fight, beat up somebody that, like who cares about, you know what I mean? Like you're not good enough to win a title in the UFC. You're not good enough to hang there. I feel like there's a big drop off now for her. That's just my opinion. Kayla Harris has a lot to lose, I guess is what I'm getting at.
Well, and let me talk. I'm glad James brought that up. So, and it's not surprising to me that it's the PFL CEO who's talking about wanting to make this fight, because obviously PFL being the smaller promotion, they've not been around for as long as Bellator. They've obviously got more to gain from a co-promotion, right? And this is what PFL CEO Peter Murray, I believe I've met him before. He's a great dude, and I'm a big fan. And James and I, we've both been to a couple of PFL events. I love what they're doing. So he talked about making Cyborg, Kayla Harrison in a co-promotion. He said, we are proponents of that. He said on the MMA Hour, we've been out there and Kayla wants that fight. We believe Chris wants that fight. And if we could make it happen between the two organizations, the PFL and Bellator, as a cross promotion and joint event, which we're still open to, we'll take another path to see if we can put that together. So with Bellator being the bigger fish in that pond, Frank, do you think that they'll be willing to negotiate here? Because I will say something on behalf of this fight. Scott Coker, who runs Bellator, he's done stuff like this before when he was with Strikeforce. But again, that was primarily for Fedor Emelianenko, that they were desperate to get him in the Strikeforce cage at that time. So they co-promoted with his M1 Global that his manager was behind. So, but they have co-promoted before. And Scott Coker, he's nothing like Dana White, right? Dana White doesn't even entertain co-promotion type of stuff. But do you think Bellator would go for this? Because it's obvious PFL, because they want to keep Kayla happy, and there's really nobody for her to fight in PFL. And it benefits them to be on that stage, because like Bellator can help PFL more than PFL can help Bellator, I think. Do you think Bellator would be willing to make this happen?
It's hard to answer that if you don't know what the backroom conversations are. On the surface, they should not, because, for the same reason Dana White would never do that with the UFC. The UFC is the Premier League, is the NFL of the sport or what have you. And so you wouldn't want to elevate someone else's brand at your expense and also potentially have your fighter lose. But I don't know what Coker and Murray are talking about. They might be thinking about the UFC as the Goliath. Maybe there's some synergies here where we can, partner, and there might even be eventually, an absorption of one league by the other, or, however they want to do it. But there may be some advantages for them working together, not just on this fight, but this fight will be a template for how they can work together in the future and potentially compete more effectively with the UFC as a duo. But I don't know what kind of conversations they're having, so it's really hard to answer. I would say that'd be a lot of fun if they just said, look, this is how we're going to do it. This is how we're going to co-promote. If my fighter wins, I keep my fighter and I get your fighter's contract.
If I were PFL, I would sign up immediately for that, because Kayla's going to beat Cyborg. I'm sorry. Yeah. Kayla Harrison's going to beat Cyborg, and they could bring Cyborg over. Yeah.
But, and we've talked about it, I'm sorry to monopolize, but just I want to make one point. Which league is going to really adhere to what you need to do to live in a UFC-dominated MMA landscape and make a lot of money? Which league is going to adhere to the young developmental people that we know are going to go to the UFC, and then we take the retirees and just stay on that formula? Like we talked about, the Kayla Harris thing for PFL was dumb, really, on paper, because, like, why are you doing that? That's not who you are. That's really not who you should be. She should be moving on to the UFC, and then, you've made money on her, and then there's going to be some retired female, Amanda Nunes, somebody on the slide, right, that's going to drop into your lap, pre-promoted for you, that you make money on. I mean, I'm interested which of these leagues is going to, stick to the program.
That's a good question.
It makes sense for the fans to do this, but to me, this seems like a calculated move by Peter Murray and the PFL, because if you guys remember the backstory, Bellator was going to get Kayla Harrison. They were going to get Kayla Harrison. PFL had a match in the contract to where they were able to match the offer to prevent her from going to Bellator and fighting Cyborg, which is what she wanted. And she didn't seem as happy to come back to PFL, even though the contract was matched. So this looks like a chess move by the PFL to say, look, we matched your contract. We know that, you might have been a little dissatisfied with the fact that, you don't get to make this fight, but we're trying everything we can do, including putting it out there in the media, that we're trying to make this fight happen. So this seems like an effort for PFL to really try to keep Kayla Harrison happy. Just in the textbook way of just having her fight in the tournament and win $1 million every year is good for her monetarily, but I don't think that really makes her happy in terms of being a competitor. So this just seems like Peter Murray doing a chess move. I don't really think Scott Coker's all that interested in, to be honest with you.
That's a good point. I like both your points because Frank got me excited when you talked about maybe them doing more co-promotion to try to make a dent on the UFC. And that kind of reminds me, and I noticed we talked about this before a long time ago, and there's been some debates coming up in the MMA media about this. Whereas the UFC's strategy, since they've been on ESPN, especially this ESPN deal, there's a lot of value on just the volume of content, right? Put as much out as you possibly can. ESPN Plus, help us grow our streaming platform. We'll promote you to an ESPN audience. The pay-per-views have been pretty good recently for the most part, but there's just such a volume of the fight night cards. It's so much. Like the last 2 weekends, like I've said, on paper, the Bellator cards have looked better the last couple of weekends on paper heading in. And so to me, and James, I'll start with you on this one. As a fight fan, do you like this strategy from the UFC where it's basically quantity over quality, right? Because you can look at it and say, like, I remember years ago, I only used to be able to watch a fight like once a month, once every 2 months. I love MMA. They're giving me fights every week. This is fantastic. Or do you say, I preferred when it was, a once a month type of thing, and I was getting the best possible cards every single time? Because I understand why the UFC is doing this, and it's effective because it's affected me as a fan. Like before they were putting on shows every single week, I used to watch a lot more of the other promotions. I used to watch a lot more Asian MMA. I used to watch a lot more Bellator. Back when Strikeforce was around, I watched a lot more Strikeforce, but it's like the UFC just puts out so many shows. They've gotten so big that a lot of times people either forget or don't even realize that there are other events happening in MMA in other parts of the world and on other networks. So like they're basically just hogging all the spotlight from the competition. So from a business standpoint, I think what they're doing is working. But as a fight fan, do you like it this way or did you prefer the old way?
Yeah, I preferred it the old way because I prefer the quality over quantity, because a lot of these cards are 3-hour commitments to do. They start at 7 and ends at 10, or start at 9 and ends at midnight. And so a lot of times just to see one fight, like last week, I was only really interested in the, Vicente Luque against Belal Muhammad. The rest of the fights I wasn't that interested in. So am I going to make a 3-hour commitment to see a 125-minute fight? So yeah, I like the quality over quantity, but as you mentioned, Alex, and Frank, you'll appreciate this as more of a business term. The UFC's flooding the market. They're doing a McDonald's. They're putting a store on every corner, and they're making you forget about the competition. I mean, I don't watch Bellator, as much. I don't watch ONE FC, when they come on. I know a UFC fight is going to be on 3-4 times a month, pretty much every weekend. So I'm already programmed into their programming. So yeah, I can't disagree with what they're doing, because from a business sense, it makes sense. Disney is asking for content. They have a streaming service, unlimited content. Give us as much content as possible. So content. They're doing that and making a lot of money doing it. But as a fight fan, a lot of these cards have been thin. A lot of these fight night cards have been thin. And it kind of turns you off a little bit as a fan.
Yeah, I won't belabor the point about, flooding the market. That's a good point that you both made. But there's another thing that's happening. that's interesting, I think, almost philosophically. Prize fighting has always been the big thing, the big moment, the stacked event, the thing that only happens once in a great while. And I'm thinking about boxing because that's where it originated. And it's such a big deal that you're going to pay for it, and you're going to have all your neighbors over. Holyfield doesn't fight Riddick Bowe every 2 weeks. It happens once in a great while. And Roy Jones is going to take the ring, and you're going to do it. You're going to watch it, you're going to pay, and it's exciting. The UFC is a prize fighting kind of like origin organization. It's built on that premise, but they are transitioning to a mainstream sport. And so you don't watch a basketball game every 6 months and you got every player in the league playing in the game. Ditto for football. And both of those, by the way, are 3-hour commitments. So you need that, those teams in the NFL, what is it, 3 or 4 nights a week now they're playing games, and Sundays playing games and games. They just added games in regular season. The NBA refuses to shorten the season for some reason I can't understand. It must be TV revenue.
It is for sure TV revenue.
So it's just it's a weird thing that we're watching, or it's an interesting dynamic that we're watching, where this thing that originated from the concept of the major event has to transition into the season. But unlike football, baseball, basketball, MMA doesn't have a season. It's got to just go on and on and on. And so that's when I think it becomes like, oh my God, like this is overwhelming. So, anyway, it's an interesting transition that's happening. And, as a fan, Alex, I guess to answer your question directly, I miss the stacked maybe 8 times a year. I miss the old days, and that was like, man, that's going to be good. But, it's changing. It's a mainstream sport now, or it's becoming that.
Alex, you may know this better than me, but does ratings matter in streaming? Because it seems like the UFC is pretty intentional when they have an ABC card or, even maybe an ESPN card. They'll have better main events versus an ESPN Plus card, to where they'll just put any fight as the main event, where it's almost like they don't care about ratings or streams. So I'm just curious if it's on streaming, does ratings really matter? Do they care?
Not really. I mean, I'm sure that they track it, like as a matter of curiosity, but the big, from what I understand, the only thing that really matters for streaming services is just the subscriber count, that they just try to beef that up. It's like, I don't know if you guys were seeing that, like Netflix just had a huge dip in their subscriber count. So now they're going to raise the prices, try to make up for that. They're going to offer like a second tier with commercials. I'm a little bit frugal, so I'll be doing the commercial tier when that comes out. I don't mind sitting through a few commercials if I can save a few bucks.
They got to figure out a way to get people to stop sharing their password. I mean, that's really
the thing.
Do. But you see that with their streaming service last year. I went to watch Notre Dame football game on NBC, and it's not on. I've got to go to the Peacock streaming.
Yeah.
They picked a game for that.
Yeah.
And guess what? I subscribed.
So the only thing that they really care about for their shareholders and everything is the subscriber count, the total revenue. Obviously, they want to know which events are bringing in the most subscribers. So if they see, this many people are watching the UFC, we would assume people are signing up for this. But it's the subscriber count is the end all be all. Now, something, guys, that will be a big fight if it happens, and it may happen this summer. So when Jon Jones makes his long-awaited heavyweight debut, a lot of signs pointing to Jon Jones versus Stipe Miocic, that the UFC wants to make that fight this summer. What?
Remember, that was my prediction.
You did. That was your pick. Now, Henry Cejudo, who's been doing a lot of training with Jones recently, he's probably a little bit biased towards Jon Jones, but Henry Cejudo says that fight would be easy money for Jon Jones. He says, I love that fight for Jon just because everything that Stipe has, Jon is better at, Cejudo said on his podcast, the Triple C and Schmo show. If he was fighting a Francis Ngannou, I was a little more cautious with that one just because of pure power. And when you have somebody that has scary power like that, it's a strength that kind of overwhelms whomever. You got power, but Francis Ngannou power is different. But with the Stipe fight, he says, I like it for Jon. I think it's going to allow Jon to really work on everything, like mixed martial arts as a whole, not just sticking to one base. So at the end of the day, I think it's easy money for Jones. Now, James, I give a lot of the stuff that he said there made sense, but the easy money thing, that's ridiculous. Like, you could say what you want to about, hey, it's going up against Stipe. It's different than going up against Ngannou, who can knock anybody's head into the 7th row. But going up against, like, Stipe is so well-rounded, and he's got so much experience at that weight class. Like, for John, it's the maiden voyage up at heavyweight, right? I mean, and how much of his speed is he going to lose heavier? We don't know that until we see it. There's nothing easy money about that fight.
I wonder if John would come in as the bigger guy in a heavyweight fight with
DC
Stipe.
thinks he will. Daniel Cormier talked about it, and he thinks that when John bulks up, that he'd probably be the bigger guy.
Yeah, Stipe fights at what, about 235, 240? You know, he's not a huge heavyweight, and John, you know, has the frame to blow up. And so I see a lot of Cejudo's points. I would actually favor John Jones in that fight, and congrats, Frank. You've been calling this fight for a year, by the way. So congrats on that. But yeah, I would favor John in this fight, and I think it'd be a great fight. You would know where John Jones stacks up if he's ready for that title shot, and with Stipe's a top guy. People are saying he was arguably the greatest heavyweight of all time, a year ago or so, or maybe a year and a half ago or so before he lost to Francis Ngannou. So yeah, I think it's a great matchup. I think it'll be a great fight to make in the summer. International Fight Week. Let's do it.
I think it's a very dangerous fight for John Jones as well. And I said that back when I was trying to make this prediction. I feel like fighting, as odd as this will sound, I'm going to just repeat myself, but I felt like if John Jones started his heavyweight career against Ngannou, I would give him a much higher probability of success than against Stipe. I just find Stipe to be, I just think that Ngannou, you understand what Ngannou is going to be trying to do, and I think John Jones would be able to outsmart him. I just feel like Stipe is so well-rounded and just so good at everything. I'm not saying he's better than John Jones, but I just think it's going to be a brutal fight. I mean, I think it'll be a brutal fight for John. I think it's going to be potentially heavyweight career pursuing ending.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad the fight is going this way too, because as great as John Jones is, and you won't hear me say that he isn't the greatest we've ever seen in his division, because I believe he is. I think going up to heavyweight, it's going to be very interesting to see how this plays out. I just think that he shouldn't have gotten the immediate title shot. I think starting with Stipe is great. I also think it shows Stipe a lot of respect. As boring as that guy is disrespected by the league, primarily because he's boring. But, it does show him a lot of respect for him to be the one to welcome John in. And, hey, if Stipe can beat John, he might get himself another crack. So
I also feel like Stipe is not as business smart enough to even realize that this would be a good thing for him. Because doesn't Stipe it's not the brightest bulb in the box. Like Stipe would probably just be like, I just want a title shot. I don't want to. Why this guy's never fought at heavyweight before? Why should he be able to fight? Like, Stipe, take a step back, bro. This fight would make you more money than anything else, might even make you more money than another title fight with Francis. I don't know, but this guy's going to make you a ton of. I feel like Stipe is the type where that would go just in one ear out the other, but it's not a title fight. Like, bro, just relax. This is a money fight.
I got it. I can negotiate with Stipe so easily. We'll do it in Cleveland. We'll do it.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's right. And this would be for the interim strap, right? I think they're trying to make it for an interim belt since Ngannou is going to be out until at least December. So I think there's enough incentive there. But Frank, I want to circle back on something because you said this could be, potentially heavyweight pursuit injury or ending for John Jones. Other than a bit of a power advantage, I mean, I wouldn't say a huge like Francis Ngannou power advantage. What other facet of Stipe's game would you say is better than John Jones's game?
Well, he's a collegiate wrestler at a high level, so I think that negates. I think one of John's best attributes, honestly. He was also a very successful boxer, amateur boxer. So you combine those two things, and the fact that he didn't have to gain a bunch of weight to be who he is. He walks around like that. He quit fighting. He never fought. He'd still be a 240-pound dude. That makes a difference when you're grappling with someone, when you grab hold of them, bone structure, everything. As big as John's brothers are, I don't believe that his frame is blow-up frame worthy. I think he's a thin guy. It's not. So am I. I'm not making fun. I'm just saying he's a thin guy, and I think that's why he's dealt with some drug issues in the past. You know, he has a hard time holding weight when he trains, and I think he's a thin guy. So he's very strong, obviously, but I just think that advantage. I think that's a little harder to quantify, but I think that will be a factor as well. And then I just think there's I talk about this a lot with fights, but the pressure's on one guy. You know, Stipe's kind of at the end of his run. I beat this cat, man. I make a lot of money, and then maybe I punch another big ticket. But if I don't, I don't. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I made a bunch of money. I was the champ. Whereas
he's still fireman. He kept his day job.
Yeah, John's been out for God knows how long talking about this damn moment.
Yeah.
It's finally going to come. And if he chokes, holy shit, where do you go? What do you do? So, I think a lot of pressure on John as well. So for all of those reasons, I think it will be a formidable fight for John Jones. I'm not, again, though, but just to qualify, like I'm not disagreeing. John is a tremendous talent. But I'm trying to think of a guy like that he's dealt with at light heavyweight anytime recently. I think you have to go all the way back to Daniel Cormier.
Oh,
and
for
by the way,
sure.
First fight with Daniel Cormier was pretty scary for John Jones.
Yeah, it was. It was.
So, and Stipe, last time I saw him with Daniel Cormier, last 2 times, looked pretty good.
Yeah. Well, let me bring up, guys, before we wrap up this episode, I promised myself and our audience that I would not finish the episode without bringing up the latest piece of disrespect by the UFC towards the Diaz brothers. Like, this angered me, okay? So the UFC, 2 days ago, it was the quote unquote holiday known as 420, right? You know what people like to do on 420. That's something, the Diaz brothers.
How does that work? I don't know.
I'll explain it to you off the air. Okay. But the Diaz brothers obviously are synonymous with marijuana products. And so what does the UFC do on 420? Now, I'm not criticizing this part of it on the surface because, like, the UFC, they've got both Diaz brothers under contract, so they're in control of their name, image, and likeness, and they sell NFTs of their fighters. So the UFC went out of their way on 420 to announce that they were selling the 209 pack of Diaz brothers NFTs. And they specifically mentioned they would be available on 420. But the story gets a little fucked up when you dig a little deeper, okay? When you think about the history here. And Nate Diaz pointed this out on his social media. He said, quote, "It's shit like this why I need to get the fuck out of the sorry-ass UFC. Didn't you guys suspend Nick for 5 years and fine me, being Nate, hella money for a vape pen that he used after a fight? Now you're reaping the benefits. I hope nobody buys this bullshit." He said, you know what? He's right. Yeah. He's right. Like, I get it. Like, the UFC can sell merchandise for whatever fighter that they want under contract, but he's 100% right, man, where they stole 5 years of Nick's career. They both of those fighters have been, they've had results overturned. Maybe Nate hasn't, but Nick has for sure. Results overturned for positive marijuana tests. They have fined them both money for marijuana tests over the years. And now you're trying to profit because these guys are synonymous with marijuana. It's messed up, man. It honestly is, that they're trying to reap financial benefit after stealing financially from these guys because of their marijuana use. Now you want to make money off of it? I don't like it one bit, Frank. You're shaking your head like you disagree with me.
Well, no, I agree, but
okay.
I'm going to get a little heavy on you guys. I mean, forget the Diaz brothers and that disrespect. How about all the people in jail for that? Because I'm going to say something that might be a little controversial, but damn it, I'm telling you, look it up, research, do the research, read. Marijuana was criminalized to imprison Black activists. It was done for that reason. And there were medicinal property studies going on in the 50s on marijuana and the 40s and 50s. And it was criminalized for a specific reason. And, forget the Diaz's. There's a lot of jail space choked up with people that were selling an herb that people were using generally medicinally, who now can do it on the sidewalk, apparently in almost every state now. So I think that's the bigger story about this, personally. But
man, Frank, that is deep. That's a little deep for the show. Too deep for the show. But
I have to say it, man. I mean,
it is true though. I was going to go in a direction of just the hypocrisy of the UFC playing revisionist history, because at the time they were tougher on marijuana within their fight league than they were on steroids and performance enhancers.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of fighters at the time that were not suspended and competing and winning championships and knocking people out that were juiced up. And, they were kind of looking the other way and weren't tough on it. And then eventually they did become tough on it eventually. And it hurt like 40% of their roster at the time. And now to play revisionist history and act like they were for marijuana all along, and now they're trying to monetize it. This is one of the few things involving the Diaz brothers, Alex, that I completely agree with you with. That it's wrong for them to do that.
Well,
Chase pointed out in the chat there, it was the athletic commission that suspended him. He made it seem a little bit like it was the UFC. He's correct, I believe. But now it's the UFC with their USADA testing pool. So
they could have promoted them to fight potentially in other countries where Nevada didn't. I know a lot of the other athletic commissions domestically kind of adhere by what Nevada does, but like they could have had them. The UFC's done shows in the UK, Asia. If they want to profit off their marijuana use, they could have promoted them to fight even when they were suspended in Nevada. The UFC fined them. It wasn't only Nevada that fined them. They've been fined by the company before, so it's not just Nevada.
No, I know. This is the problem too with not having a players union. And generally, I have, with athletics and the kind of communistic structure of it, I am a union person because it is designed as a kind of a socialist communist thing. And if they don't have the right to negotiate what you're testing for, it's really inappropriate because James pointed out what's performance enhancing, right? One thing is being used for whatever they're using it for, stress, anxiety, recovery. I don't know what it is. And then the other thing that was really rampantly being abused really changed the dimension of the way you were able to compete in the octagon. So, if I think if there was a fighters union, they would not have even been testing for that.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Well, it's amazing. I think we all agree. So we'll one of the rare times that we're all in concert on something, we will finish the show on that note. Again, we are served by the Quarterdeck Seafood Bar and Neighborhood Grill. Guys, you got to head on down to the Quarterdeck. They've got every UFC pay-per-view fight for zero cover charge. You pay nothing at the door. I'm going to be out there. The 5 Reasons Sports crew is going to be out there Sunday. Game 4, Heat Hawks. We're going to bring our brooms to the Quarterdeck Sunday, the Davie location, University Drive, right across the street from Nova Southeastern University. Stop by and see us there. Heat Hawks, 7 o'clock on Sunday evening. Going to be knocking down the 2-for-1 happy hour. The drink specials are awesome. Going to be loading up on some of those appetizers out there, guys. And man, I love the burgers. I love the fresh seafood. I love the baby back ribs at the Quarterdeck. So good. If you want to find the location nearest to you, head on out there for dinner tonight. Head on out there to watch the games this weekend. Visit them at their website. You can also check out the full menu there. QuarterdeckRestaurants.com. The Quarterdeck, come for the food, stay for the fun. I got no parting comments this time, guys. I think I made my parting comments with my outrage towards the UFC for profiting off of the Diaz brothers' marijuana use. Frank, James, you guys have any parting comments? Frank, you can go first.
No, man, I enjoyed the show, and you did a great job lining up the topics today, Alex. I'm really impressed. I could have done the whole show on Mike Tyson, but just got as we went.
And I did wonder if it might be better for like the YouTube algorithm if we did the whole show on Mike Tyson. I don't know, because that's what everybody's talking about this week. And actually, I do have one parting comment before James can sneak in there, because I don't think I mentioned this at the top of the show. If you're watching this, whether you're watching it live or if you're watching it via tape delay, smash the like button, hit that thumbs up button, and make sure you subscribe to 5 Reasons Sports on YouTube. But smash that like button. It helps the show and the channel grow. And Chase, thank you for thanking us, and Cliff and Zach and everybody else who showed up in the live chat. You guys are awesome. Go ahead, James.
Yeah, just Gaethje Oliveira coming up. Looking forward to it. And I'm sure we're going to be talking about that in the next week or two.
That's going to be awesome. All right. So everyone have a great weekend. Let's go Heat tonight. Let's go Cyborg tomorrow. We will talk to you guys again next time on another episode of 5 Rounds on the